If you guys aren't sick of us over here, we do have a backup channel. For those that don't know, I always put it in the description of all the videos. It's called Brenton's Riverside Hermitage. And I talk about stuff that I just think about, you know, like I've said this before. These adventures are a lot like, I feel like I'm just kind of taking my head for a ride because it gives you time to think. It's related to that book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. That's what Robert Pirsig kind of said in different words, is that, you know, he went on these adventures, but really he was just always thinking. It gave this space to think, you know. And a shanty boat trip down a river at 5 miles an hour, that's the ultimate kind of taking your head for a ride and exploring deeper subjects in a deeper way. You know, so when folks ask me, like, you know, you get bored out there? Don't you get bored? I hardly ever get bored. I don't know. I mean, I don't. I think it's one of the coolest. It's such a privilege. Good girl. And just thinking about what I just said back there and how the word privilege has been perverted into, you know, white privilege and male privilege, and I just mean it like it's supposed to be used. It's just such an honor. I mean, I guess there's synonyms for privilege. It's an honor to have the time. I mean, part of it is that, yes, I'll give myself some credit that I've made the time and made it happen, but it's more than that. You know, it's gratitude that, you know, even the best efforts can be thwarted just by life, you know, and circumstances and stuff. So I feel really privileged to be out here on the river because it's where I want to be, at least at the moment. And when I want to do something else, I'll do something else. So it's kind of the ultimate freedom. I was just listening to a podcast this morning while I was making coffee, and the topic was about how the economy, all the numbers are showing that the economy is already transitioning to just catering to about 10% of the population that has all the money. And as I'm walking around here this morning, I'm like, who plays golf? I know, you know, it was I mean, kind of a boomer thing and a grandpa thing. I'm sure some young people are playing it too, but it's got to be waning in popularity. I'll look it up, but that's just my assumption. You know, any sort of conspicuous consumption, especially golf. I mean, it's not cheap. It's not cheap to just play it on its own, but also what comes along with it, you know, like everything that all the paraphernalia. I mean, it's kind of like fishing, same thing. It's like fishing's easy, you know, a hook and a bobber and a worm, but it's all the stuff that comes along with it. But I'm a fisherman, I'm not a golfer, so but you know, I just think that, you know, this would be an example of, like, if I tried to assume, because I don't value it, like, oh, golf's got to be waning in popularity, it's going to go away, all these golf courses. Well, if 10% of the population has all the money, plays golf, then golf will still stick around. What's your thoughts? Well, here's that bridge. Neat. I think at some point I'd probably go into the residential part of this golf course. There's always, you know, homes around them. I see one being built up there. And I'd probably draw someone's attention and they'd wonder why I'm here, rightfully so. As I've been here in Tennessee and talked to some locals that have grown up here, or folks that have moved down here, you know, 10 years ago or whatever, there's a theme that talks about how, you know, outsiders have come into Tennessee, like from New York and Chicago, Illinois, California, and this is a story as old as time. You know, they drive up the prices and they don't understand the culture, and the locals, you know, somewhat resent it. That kind of happened to me when I was a kid. I got an earlier version of it, kind of the Gen X version of it, because I grew up in Northern California, which was this wonderful place to live. Got to keep an eye on Wavy here. And it wasn't crowded when I was young. Up until my 20s, there was a lot of freedom. I remember coming home and I had a little motorcycle, like a little mini bike, and I could just take off out the back of my dad's property. He had 5 acres, and just go on a trail and get onto another little road and then get on some other trail. And there was this area, there was like a reservoir that, in my mind, my young teenage mind, it was like my little sanctuary. It could have been a it could have been an alpine lake or something, with a castle. Castles keep coming up a lot in this series so far. I don't mean to. And I would just go out there and I would just think. I was a loner. I was an isolated, lonely young person. And you guys maybe have heard me say this, I've always been this huge Rush fan, the band Rush. I'm not going to go off on Rush, even though, hey, they're coming back on tour. They took on a new drummer, a woman from Germany, that's going to do the impossible and trying to fill Neil Peart's shoes, and all the concert dates and tickets are selling out, and people are really upset because they cost too much, and it's kind of a disappointment. But that's a whole other subject. Maybe I'll bring that up on the backup channel sometime, if this doesn't make it up on the backup channel, but it'll be another video. Wavy, come here. Anyway, had to go get Wavy there. And I would just decipher Rush lyrics and just think about stuff. I was a dreamer. Lived in my own little world. Kind of still do. My son does too. And so my point was, my little town filled up. And it seemed to have happened overnight. It went from, we had a lot of freedom, a lot of space, a little town that was safe, and we go to the arcade, or we go to the movies, or we just, later it was skateboarding or whatever. And then it filled up, and people came from somewhere, probably Southern California, and then a lot of the locals moved in from my town, mostly into Idaho, northern Idaho. I remember a big wave that went up there, because they were selling their houses for so much money, way more than they ever expected they would get. And then they would go spend half of it and go to northern Idaho. Wavy, I can't forget to bring a leash next time. I just keep one on the boat, I think. She's on the trail. Hold on. Get back here. Wavy. Anyhow, these little interruptions are actually good, because I can get really long-winded and too detailed. So, a lot of folks moved up to Idaho, and then I went up to Idaho and visited, some friends, and, later on when I was in my late teens and 20s, and I heard the same stories up there about all the Californians are coming up there and ruining it, and they're bringing their values, and they're bringing their politics, and they're bringing their ways and imposing them on the people that were there before. So, like I said, this is a story that's as old as time, and here in Tennessee, there's a version of that has been going on, for a while, but it's still going on, where there's like the locals and the newbies, and what explains a lot of the money here is a combination of old money and folks that were sitting on gold mines of real estate, farms and such, that they got cheap, when they were young, because they got here first. And then when they sold them, they had plenty of money to, build a castle on the side of the river, I guess. And then, of course, people who came from New York and California and these other markets, and they brought their money with them. So, I don't know. It just is what it is, I guess. I got my opinions about it, but who cares what I think? My solution is to try to keep it simple and not feel too bitter about it. So it is what it is. Of course, if you have any thoughts, I would love to hear them in the comments. I guess I'll leave it with this question. What happens when all the places that people can run to or escape to don't exist anymore. What if everything gets filled up? It's like a pressure release valve, a catharsis. I remember I studied sociology, wasted my time in college for way too long, studying one of the dumbest things on the planet as far as being applicable to having a career. And the sociology factory wasn't hiring when I got out of college. So there was it's called the Turner thesis, I think, and it was basically talked about how the Old West in America was a pressure release valve for all the misfits and outlaws and people who didn't fit into civilization on the East Coast as the U.S. was developing. And that helped to make America what it is today. It's a very complex subject, but eventually there's no place to run anymore, really. I mean, there's like the burned over lands, which is like, in a way, that's what my now hometown is of Ontonagon. It's like it had its heyday. It was just a little town that had a lot going on for a blip in time, and now there isn't 10 jobs to shake a stick at. So if you can figure out how to live there, then I guess it's a way to escape the madness. But that's kind of like my tactic applied in 10 different ways, my lifestyle. But yeah, do you know what I'm talking about? It's like eventually there just isn't places you can run to anymore. The Midwest is even starting to fill up, and that I don't think people thought that would ever happen. Load up. Hey, come on. You know this term. Hey, this way. Load up. Load up. You are a slave to your nose, dog. Load up. Look, I'll even pull it in a little closer. Load up. Go. Go, 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 go. Squid, squid. Before we move on here, I was thinking I couldn't talk about this subject or try to without including immigration and how that's just another form of this. There's people who come in from other parts of the country, of course, and then there's people who come in from other parts of the world, and why and how. And this subject, of course, makes people pick a side, and trust me, I have a side and I have an opinion about it, but that's too easy and that's too lazy of thinking is what I've learned, is that I don't want to just be a knee-jerk reactionist, is that a word? Reactionary about every topic and become, left or right. I kind of want to train myself to look at subjects as objectively as possible, and I can still have my opinions, but they don't really matter. They're not the main point. And so, yeah, the country's filling up. If you look at some official plans by the UN and the World Economic Forum, we're supposed to go from 330 million is kind of officially what we have now. It's probably more, but to something like 600 million in this country. The globalists would say that we're an underpopulated country, believe it or not. So imagine another double what we have now. And then where can a freedom-loving person that doesn't want to be living in populated centers, what are they supposed to do? So that's an honest question. That's a earnest question I'm proposing to you if you have any thoughts. So okay, guys, we're going to go back to the boat. I'm going to see if I can fix this prop. You're probably watching this on the backup channel by now. This is not Backwaters and Backroads. This is Brenton's Riverside Hermitage, our backup channel. If you are new here, please subscribe. It's free. All this stuff is free, So if you like these kind of talks, and it's just supplemental videos, different stuff, just depending on the day. So, okay, guys, thanks for being here, and I'll see you back over on Backwaters and Backroads.